Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the world's most famous maritime mysteries. Today, we are going to dive into a case that shocked the 19th century and remains unsolved to this very day. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, one of the strangest seafaring enigmas ever recorded. Mary Celeste was not just an ordinary merchant ship. Built in Nova Scotia, Canada, and later owned by Americans. It was a medium-sized vessel designed for long transatlantic voyages. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York City carrying a very particular cargo. Thousands of barrels of industrial alcohol, bound for the port of Genoa, Italy. It was expected to be a smooth and profitable journey, as the Atlantic route between America and Europe had become well traveled by seasoned sailors of that era. What made this voyage stand out was that Captain Benjamin Briggs did not travel alone. Accompanying him were his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Alongside them were 7 experienced crew members, each carefully selected. For a captain to bring his wife and young child aboard signaled how confident he was in both his ship and his crew. At that time, the Mary Celeste was seen not only as a capable merchant vessel but also as a ship that could safely carry the captain's family across the ocean. Yet, less than a month after leaving New York, the Mary Celeste entered history in a way no one could have foreseen. On December 4, 1872, another merchant vessel, the British ship Dei Grazia, spotted the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly near the Azores Islands. There were no distress signals, no signs of damage, and no response when they tried to hail the ship. When the crew of Dei Grazia boarded her, what they discovered left them completely stunned. Everything on board seemed intact. The cargo remained untouched, provisions were plentiful, and the crew's personal belongings were still in place. Yet, the captain, his family, and all 7 crew members had vanished without a trace. The ship's lifeboat was missing, suggesting that the crew might have abandoned ship in haste. But why would they do so when the Mary Celeste was still seaworthy and capable of continuing its voyage? What possible emergency had forced such a sudden decision? This is what makes the story of the Mary Celeste so enduringly mysterious. The ship itself was later brought safely to port and continued to sail for many years, but the fate of those who had been aboard in 1872 has never been explained. Over the decades, countless theories have been proposed ranging from natural disasters to human error, from explosions of alcohol fumes to more imaginative ideas, but none have ever been proven. And so, the tale of the Mary Celeste lives on as one of history's greatest unsolved sea mysteries. In the next part, we will explore the clues left behind, the possible explanations, and why even after more than 150 years, the Mary Celeste is still remembered as the world's most famous ghost ship. To understand why the Mary Celeste continues to fascinate people, we must first look at the people who boarded her in November 1872. At the center of the story was Captain Benjamin Briggs, a respected seaman with years of experience navigating the Atlantic. Known for his discipline and calm decision-making, Briggs was far from reckless. In fact, his reputation suggested he was the kind of captain who would take every precaution to ensure a safe voyage. Alongside him was his wife Sarah Briggs, who chose to accompany her husband on this journey. Bringing along their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, turned this business trip into a family voyage. For many, this detail is particularly haunting. Because it was not just a group of sailors lost, it was also a young family that vanished without explanation. Their presence on board also emphasizes how confident Captain Briggs must have been about the safety of this particular trip. The rest of the crew consisted of 7 carefully chosen sailors. They were all considered capable and experienced, men who had worked on similar transatlantic routes. This was not a hastily assembled group, but rather a team handpicked by the captain to ensure efficiency and reliability. Historical records suggest that Briggs had a good relationship with his crew, and there were no early signs of conflict or unrest. Altogether, there were 10 adults and 1 child on board the Mary Celeste when she departed New York. Every single one of them would later be listed as missing. There were no reports of illness before departure, no storm warnings, and nothing unusual in the ship's condition. Everything pointed to a voyage that should have been routine. Yet this ordinary beginning is exactly what makes the disappearance so perplexing. How could an experienced captain, his wife, their young daughter, and 7 capable sailors simply vanish from a ship that remained intact? The human dimension of the story, families torn apart, lives cut short, and unanswered questions adds to the sense of tragedy. Unlike many other sea mysteries, the Mary Celeste was not destroyed, burned, or sunk. It survived the ocean, but its people did not. This contrast between a ship that endured and a crew that disappeared is at the heart of the Mary Celeste mystery. It forces us to ask, what could have driven such a disciplined captain and an entire crew to abandon a ship that was still seaworthy, and why, after so many investigations, has no evidence of their fate ever been discovered? When the Mary Celeste departed New York on November 7, 1872, the ship was in good condition, well provisioned, and prepared for a long transatlantic journey. Her destination was Genoa, Italy, a bustling port city where her valuable cargo of over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol was expected to be unloaded and sold. With favorable weather and an experienced crew, there was little reason to suspect that this voyage would become one of history's greatest mysteries. For nearly 3 weeks, the Mary Celeste sailed steadily across the Atlantic. The ship's logbook entries, the official daily records of the journey, showed no sign of trouble. The last entry, dated November 25, placed the vessel near the Azores Islands, a remote archipelago in the mid-Atlantic. Nothing in the captain's notes suggested danger, illness, or fear. It was simply another day at sea. And then silence. On December 4, 1872, nearly 400 miles east of the Azores, another merchant ship, the British vessel Dei Grazia, spotted the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly. From a distance, it looked strange. Her sails were partly set, but she was moving slowly and irregularly, as though abandoned. At first, the crew of the Dei Grazia thought she might be in distress. But as they drew closer, it became clear that something was very wrong. Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Grazia ordered a boarding party to investigate. What they found was both puzzling and chilling. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy, with no signs of fire, collision, or violent struggle. The cargo was intact. The provisions for months of sailing were untouched, and personal belongings of the crew remained neatly in place. There was no blood, no evidence of panic, and no clear explanation for what had happened. Yet the most important detail was impossible to ignore: the ship was completely empty. Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their daughter Sophia, and all 7 crew members had vanished. The only clue was the missing lifeboat, suggesting that the crew had abandoned ship for reasons unknown. But if they had left in haste, why had they not returned, and why was there no distress signal or record of a disaster in the logbook? For Captain Morehouse and his men, the discovery was both a duty and a burden. Maritime law allowed them to claim salvage rights if they brought the Mary Celeste safely to port. But the circumstances were unsettling. Sailing a ghost ship across the ocean was no easy task, both practically and psychologically. Nevertheless, they escorted the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, where an official investigation began. This was the turning point, what should have been a straightforward salvage case turned into one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in nautical history. Investigators soon realized that the absence of the crew could not be explained by ordinary misfortune alone. Something extraordinary, perhaps even unthinkable, had happened in those silent days after the last log entry. When the Mary Celeste was finally brought into Gibraltar in December 1872, it immediately became the subject of intense scrutiny. The local authorities launched an official inquiry, determined to uncover what had happened to the missing crew. At first, investigators assumed they would find a simple explanation: a storm, an accident, or perhaps even piracy. But the more they looked, the stranger the story became. Inspectors carefully examined the ship from bow to stern. The hull was solid, with no sign of serious damage. The cargo of alcohol was mostly intact, though a few barrels were found empty or leaking. Some suggested that fumes from the alcohol might have caused the crew to panic, fearing an explosion. Yet there was no evidence of fire or burns anywhere on the ship. One detail stood out. The lifeboat was gone, along with some navigational instruments and ship documents. This suggested that the crew had left voluntarily, taking essentials they would need to survive at sea. But if they had abandoned the ship in an orderly fashion, why had they not returned once they realized the Mary Celeste was still afloat and undamaged? The logbook entries provided little help. The final note, dated November 25, recorded nothing unusual, just the ship's position near the Azores. The days that followed remained a blank space in history, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. There were also puzzling signs on board. The ship's pumps had been dismantled, and some hatches were found open. A sword was discovered under the captain's bed, though it showed no trace of use. The galley, the kitchen area, was tidy, with no meals left half prepared. It was as if everyone had calmly walked off the ship, never to return. Speculation grew quickly. Some believed the crew had feared the ship was sinking due to misjudged water levels in the hold, leading them to evacuate too soon. Others suspected foul play, mutiny, pirates, or even insurance fraud. But investigators could not prove any of these theories. The official report concluded only that the crew had abandoned the vessel for reasons unknown. The case also stirred controversy in the courts. Since the Mary Celeste had been found abandoned, her salvagers, the crew of the Dei Grazia, were entitled to a reward. However, the judges hesitated, uneasy about the mysterious circumstances. Ultimately, the salvagers received a payment much smaller than expected. As if the authorities themselves were unsure whether they were dealing with a tragedy, a crime, or something far stranger. What should have been a routine maritime case had now become international news. Newspapers across Europe and America picked up the story, fueling rumors and speculation. The Mary Celeste was no longer just a ship, it had become a symbol of mystery. An unsolved puzzle that gripped the public imagination. As news of the Mary Celeste spread, the world became fascinated by the question, what really happened to the crew? Without evidence to settle the matter, countless theories began to circulate, ranging from practical explanations to wild speculation. One of the most widely discussed theories was the alcohol explosion hypothesis. Since the ship was carrying over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, some suggested that fumes may have leaked and caused a near explosion. If flammable vapors filled the hold, even a single spark could have spelled disaster. Captain Briggs, fearing an imminent blast, might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily, expecting to return once the danger had passed. But if the lifeboat drifted away or capsized, the crew could have been lost at sea. Still, skeptics point out that there was no sign of fire or scorching anywhere on the vessel. Another idea was piracy or foul play. In the 19th century, the Atlantic was not free from criminal activity. Could raiders have boarded, stolen valuables, and left the ship adrift? This theory quickly lost credibility, however, because the cargo and crew's belongings remained untouched. If it had been pirates, why leave the ship intact and unharmed? Some proposed the possibility of a mutiny, with the crew turning against Captain Briggs. Yet those who knew Briggs and his sailors doubted this idea. The men were carefully chosen and had no history of trouble. Moreover, the ship bore no signs of violence, no broken furniture, no blood, no weapons used. Nature itself was another suspect. Perhaps a waterspout or rogue wave struck, terrifying the crew and convincing them the ship was doomed. A sudden storm could have separated the lifeboat from the Mary Celeste, leaving the ship to drift while its passengers perished. But the logbook and condition of the ship suggested no such violent weather. There were also smaller, more technical theories. The broken pump found on board could have led the captain to believe the ship was taking on water faster than it could be expelled. With hatches open and instruments missing, maybe Briggs thought abandoning ship was the safest option. Later, however, it was proven that the ship was still seaworthy and far from sinking. Beyond these rational explanations, the mystery also gave rise to more sensational speculation: sea monsters, supernatural forces, or curses. While these belong more to legend than fact, they reflect just how baffling the case was to people at the time. The absence of clear evidence left room for imagination, and the Mary Celeste became a canvas for theories both scientific and mythical. Yet, despite all these possibilities, none has ever been confirmed. The truth about what happened between the last log entry and the discovery remains locked in silence, hidden somewhere in the vast Atlantic. Despite the many theories put forward, investigators and historians have always faced the same problem: none of the explanations fully match the evidence. Every idea seems to answer one question but leaves behind several others. Take the alcohol vapor explosion theory. It explains why the crew may have feared for their lives, but it does not explain why they never returned once they realized the ship was still intact. If they evacuated only as a precaution, surely they would have reboarded once the danger passed. Yet the Mary Celeste remained adrift, and the lifeboat was never found. The piracy theory fails for a different reason. Pirates in the 19th century would have looted the valuable cargo, stripped personal belongings, or at least left behind signs of conflict. Instead, the Mary Celeste was found with her cargo untouched and the cabins neatly arranged. It was the opposite of what a pirate raid would look like. The mutiny hypothesis runs into similar issues. Mutineers rarely abandon a perfectly good ship. They take control of it. And again, there were no marks of violence or resistance. No trace of a struggle that such an event would surely have left behind. Even the storm or rogue wave theory falters under scrutiny. The ship showed no evidence of severe weather damage, no broken masts, no flooded compartments, and the logbook gave no indication of a terrifying storm. It was as if the Mary Celeste had been sailing on calm waters when the crew simply vanished. This is what has baffled people for more than a century. Each theory sounds reasonable at first, but collapses under closer inspection. And in that vacuum of certainty, the Mary Celeste transformed from a maritime case file into a legendary ghost ship. The press of the late 19th century played a huge role in this transformation. Newspapers seized on the eerie details: a seaworthy ship found adrift, provisions untouched, cargo intact, and not a single soul on board. Writers began referring to the Mary Celeste as a ship of mystery and later, more dramatically, as a ghost ship. The image of a fully functioning vessel, gliding silently across the ocean with no one at the helm, captured the imagination of readers worldwide. As time passed, the legend only grew. The Mary Celeste became the subject of books, plays, and countless retellings, each one adding layers of drama to the story. Some versions exaggerated the mystery, claiming meals were left on the table or coffee still warm in cups, details that were never in the official reports but made for chilling storytelling. By the turn of the 20th century, the Mary Celeste was no longer just a maritime incident, it was a cultural icon. It symbolized the ultimate unsolved sea mystery, where fact blurred with folklore and the absence of truth gave birth to myth. Although the disappearance of Captain Briggs, his family, and the crew made headlines, the Mary Celeste itself did not vanish into history right away. In fact, after the Gibraltar investigation ended, the ship was repaired, cleared for sailing again, and put back into service. For over a decade, it continued to cross the seas, carrying goods and cargo just like any other merchant vessel. Yet the ship was never able to escape its dark reputation. Sailors are famously superstitious, and many viewed the Mary Celeste as cursed. Rumors spread that bad luck followed her wherever she went. Crew members signed on reluctantly, and some even refused to board her at all. Over the years, the ship changed ownership multiple times, but it always carried the shadow of its infamous past. By the early 1880s, the Mary Celeste had fallen into the hands of less careful owners. Instead of being used as a proud merchant ship, it became increasingly tied to dubious ventures. Finally, in 1885, its story came to a dramatic close. While sailing near Haiti, the Mary Celeste was deliberately run aground on a reef by her then captain, who was attempting to commit insurance fraud. The plan was to destroy the ship, claim it was lost, and collect compensation on the cargo. But the scheme failed. The ship was badly damaged and left stranded, and the fraud was quickly uncovered. With that, the Mary Celeste's long and troubled career finally ended. Not in mystery this time, but in disgrace. She was abandoned and left to rot, her remains eventually swallowed by the sea. Still, even in her final years, the ship's reputation lingered. The fact that such a famous ghost ship ended its life in a dishonest act of fraud only added to its tragic aura. The Mary Celeste was gone, but the mystery of what happened in 1872 lived on and grew with each passing year. This strange ending left people with a haunting contrast, a ship once at the center of one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries ultimately reduced to wreckage and scandal. Yet, if anything, that ending ensured that the story of the Mary Celeste would never be forgotten. Even though the Mary Celeste met a bleak end in 1885, her story did not sink with her wreck. Instead, the mystery of 1872 gave the ship a second life, one that lived on in books, plays, and legends. The unanswered questions surrounding her crew's disappearance made the Mary Celeste a symbol of the unknown. And in time she became known worldwide as the most famous ghost ship in history. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, writers began retelling and embellishing the story. Newspapers and magazines added dramatic flourishes that were never part of the official investigation. Half-eaten meals on the captain's table, steaming mugs of coffee, or sewing needles left mid-stitch. Though these details were fictional, they made the mystery even more haunting for the public. Readers were captivated by the idea of a ship abandoned in perfect order, as though time itself had stopped. One of the most influential retellings came from author Arthur Conan Doyle, best known as the creator of Sherlock Holmes. In 1884, he published a short story loosely inspired by the Mary Celeste, called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. Although fictional, it used a renamed version of the ship Mary Celeste and spread many of the myths that people still associate with the case today. Doyle's story brought the mystery to a global audience and cemented its place in popular imagination. Since then, the Mary Celeste has appeared in countless novels, films, documentaries, and even songs. She has been used as a metaphor for the unknown, a warning about the dangers of the sea, and a reminder of how fragile human life can be against nature's vastness. Maritime museums, historians, and mystery enthusiasts continue to revisit her story, debating the theories and re-examining the evidence. What makes the Mary Celeste so enduring is not just the disappearance itself, but the fact that it defies closure. With no bodies recovered, no lifeboat found, and no clear answer, the case sits in a rare space between history and legend. It belongs both to the world of documented fact and to the realm of myth, where imagination fills in the blanks left by silence. Today, when people hear the term ghost ship, the Mary Celeste is the first image that comes to mind. She represents the haunting allure of the sea, the vast, unpredictable ocean that holds countless secrets beneath its waves. More than 150 years later, her name still inspires curiosity, speculation, and wonder. The Mary Celeste may be gone, but her story continues to sail across time, carried not by the wind or the tide, but by the human fascination with mysteries that refuse to be solved. Over a century and a half later, the Mary Celeste is more than just a historical case. She has become a symbol of human curiosity and the enduring power of mystery. In a world where science and technology have explained so many things, the Mary Celeste remains one of those rare stories that refuses to yield a final answer. For many, the ship represents the unpredictability of the sea. The ocean has always been a place of both opportunity and danger. It carries goods, connects continents, and supports livelihoods, but it also hides secrets, swallows evidence, and reminds us that nature cannot always be controlled. The Mary Celeste embodies this paradox. A ship that survived while her people did not, leaving us to wonder what went wrong. On a deeper level, the mystery reflects something universal about the human condition: the need for closure. We naturally seek explanations, patterns, and conclusions. When a story ends without them, as with the Mary Celeste, it unsettles us. That unease is exactly why the case continues to resonate. It reminds us that not every chapter in history can be neatly tied up. The Mary Celeste also carries a symbolic weight as a story of trust and fragility. Captain Briggs trusted the ocean enough to bring his wife and young daughter aboard. The crew trusted their captain and their ship. Yet, despite preparation, experience, and courage, something happened that none of them could overcome. It shows how fragile human life can be in the face of uncertainty, and how even the most capable can be undone by the unknown. In literature and popular culture, the Mary Celeste has come to symbolize the phrase "vanished without a trace." Her story is invoked whenever a disappearance defies explanation, whether on land, in the air, or at sea. She is not just a ship in history books, but a metaphor, a shorthand for mystery itself. In today's world, where so much information is instantly accessible, the Mary Celeste reminds us of the power of unanswered questions. Sometimes, what we do not know is more compelling than what we do. And in that sense, the ship has sailed far beyond her original voyage, taking on a new role as a timeless legend. The story of the Mary Celeste resonates not because it terrifies, but because it fascinates. It stirs imagination, sparks debate, and invites us to think about how humans respond when faced with the incomprehensible. That is why, more than 150 years later, she still drifts through our collective memory, not as wreckage at the bottom of the sea, but as a living mystery carried forward by generations of storytellers. The mystery of the Mary Celeste does not stand alone. Throughout history, the sea has given rise to countless stories of strange vanishings, unexplained phenomena, and ships lost without reason. What sets the Mary Celeste apart, however, is how real and documented her case was. Unlike many maritime legends, she was a tangible ship with an official logbook, a verified crew, and an actual discovery at sea. That is why her story continues to be retold alongside other great mysteries of the ocean. Take, for example, the Flying Dutchman, a legendary ghost ship said to roam the seas, doomed never to make port. For centuries, sailors claimed to have seen its glowing silhouette, often interpreting it as a bad omen. While the Flying Dutchman is firmly rooted in folklore, the Mary Celeste is different. She was no myth, but a real vessel, found intact and drifting with her people missing. In many ways, the Mary Celeste became the real-life version of the ghost ship legend. Another comparison often made is with the Bermuda Triangle, a region in the Atlantic Ocean infamous for unexplained disappearances of ships and planes. Stories of the triangle gained popularity in the 20th century, with theories ranging from magnetic anomalies to alien abductions. The Mary Celeste predates these tales, but her mystery is often grouped with them as part of the ocean's unsolved puzzles. The difference is that her disappearance did not involve the ship itself, it was the crew that vanished, leaving the vessel behind as haunting evidence. Even in modern times, maritime mysteries continue. Ships like the SS Aurang Medan, allegedly found adrift in the 1940s with its entire crew dead under bizarre circumstances, echo the same eerie themes. Yet historians debate whether that story was even real, while the Mary Celeste's authenticity is unquestionable. Her case, therefore, serves as a benchmark for how the unknown at sea becomes legend. What unites all these stories is the sea's ability to inspire awe and fear. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, yet much of it remains unexplored. In that vastness, it is no wonder that mysteries thrive. But among them all, the Mary Celeste holds a special place because she bridges the gap between legend and reality. She is proof that sometimes truth can be just as strange and far more haunting than fiction. By standing alongside the Flying Dutchman, the Bermuda Triangle, and other legendary tales, the Mary Celeste reminds us that the ocean is not just water and waves. It is also a stage for some of the greatest mysteries of human history, where the line between fact and myth is often blurred by the unknown. More than 150 years after she was first found adrift, the Mary Celeste still captures the imagination of people all around the world. Historians, maritime experts, and mystery enthusiasts continue to revisit her story, not just because of what happened in 1872, but because of what the case represents about human curiosity. One reason the Mary Celeste endures is that the evidence is so incomplete. Unlike other mysteries where records or survivors offer at least partial answers, here we have a seaworthy ship, untouched cargo, and personal belongings left behind but no human witnesses. That absence makes the story uniquely haunting. Every theory seems plausible until you dig deeper, and every attempt at a solution leaves gaps. This constant sense of almost knowing keeps the mystery alive. Another reason is that the Mary Celeste has become a kind of blank canvas for imagination. Writers, filmmakers, and storytellers have taken the bare facts and added their own interpretations. From realistic dramas to supernatural tales. Because the truth is unknown, the story adapts to each generation's fears and fascinations. In the 19th century, people suspected pirates and mutiny. In the 20th century, speculation leaned toward natural disasters or mysterious forces of the sea. Today, modern audiences connect the Mary Celeste to broader themes of survival, human error, and the mysteries of nature. The case also resonates because it reflects a very human fear. Disappearance without explanation. To vanish at sea is already terrifying, but to leave behind a functioning ship intensifies the sense of strangeness. It forces us to confront how fragile order can be, and how quickly certainty can collapse into the unknown. Beyond fear, however, the Mary Celeste inspires a sense of wonder. The ocean has always been a frontier of exploration, and unsolved cases like this remind us that the world still holds secrets. In an age of satellites and GPS tracking, where so much is monitored and recorded, the Mary Celeste is a reminder that not everything can be explained or contained. Her legacy also thrives because she is not just a tragedy but a story without an ending. That unfinished quality invites people to step in as detectives, piecing together clues and forming theories. Each new generation rediscovers the mystery, debates it, and adds fresh perspectives, ensuring that the Mary Celeste never fades completely into the past. In the end, the Mary Celeste is not only a ghost ship but also a mirror of our own fascination with the unknown. She continues to drift, not on the waters of the Atlantic, but through our collective imagination, an eternal voyage fueled by the one thing she has never surrendered, her secret. The story of the Mary Celeste is more than just a maritime mystery. It is a reminder of how fragile certainty can be, and how deeply the unknown continues to shape our imagination. In November of 1872, 11 souls set sail across the Atlantic on a routine voyage. By December, their ship was found adrift, intact and seaworthy, but they themselves had vanished forever. No storms, no battles, no clear signs of disaster, just silence and absence. That silence has echoed for more than 150 years. It has inspired historians to search archives, scientists to test theories, and writers to spin tales that blur fact and legend. Yet, despite the endless speculation, one truth remains: we will probably never know what happened on the Mary Celeste. And perhaps that is why her story endures. The Mary Celeste reminds us that the ocean is still a place of mystery, vast and untamed. Even in our age of technology and satellites, the sea holds secrets that defy explanation. She also shows us something about ourselves, our hunger for answers, our discomfort with the unexplained, and our willingness to create stories when evidence runs out. When we look back at the Mary Celeste, we do not just see an abandoned ship, we see the hopes of a family, the skill of a crew, and the unanswered questions that haunt history. We see how myth and reality can intertwine, turning a single event into a lasting legend. And we realize that sometimes, what we cannot solve is just as powerful as what we can. So, the next time you hear the term ghost ship, remember the Mary Celeste. She was no phantom from folklore, but a real vessel, carrying real people, whose fate remains an eternal question mark. Her voyage never reached its destination, but her story continues to travel across time, stirring wonder and fascination in every generation. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the greatest mysteries of the sea. If you enjoyed this exploration, do not forget to leave a comment with your thoughts. What theory do you think makes the most sense? And of course, remember to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next deep dive into history's most puzzling secrets. Until then, may your own journeys be safe, and may the mystery of the Mary Celeste remind us that the world is still full of unanswered questions. See you in the next story.